Well, hello everybody, welcome back to the channel, Reading Ideas, and I've got a reading idea for you today. In a recent video that I posted, I put up about the short story book by Ernest Hemingway, A Movable Feast, about his early days in Paris. And I said in that it might be an idea if you're going to read Hemingway not to start with that one. And I had a great friend from a great suggestion from a friend watching, Chris. Thanks, Chris, who said, okay, then what would you start with? So I gave a couple of examples, the short stories Men Without Women, but also his first full novel, Fiesta, which is what we're going to be talking about today, with its secondary title, The Sun Also Rises. Okay. So, it's a fantastic book. Yes, a lot to get into about this book and the context of it. Okay, so I've read quite a bit of Hemingway's work and about Hemingway himself. So, yeah, if we start with the context of the book, we've just had an American dominated century, including cultural as well, from McDonald's to film, TV. Now, Hemingway is one of the great modern American writers, arguably the greatest, and a great influence on many writers. And we'll come on to that. So it's an important work. It's his first foray into a major novel. Okay, so the background to it. There's so many elements to this. So the background to it. Hemingway, as a young man, he. I don't know whether he wanted to be famous, but at some point he decided he was going to be a great and famous writer, and he wanted his own style. Now, part of that, he went away to war, and this book is written in the aftermath of the First World War. And he draws on that experience. He, after the First World War, he moved himself to Paris with his young wife, Hemingway was injured in the First World War, and she was his nurse. She was a bit older than him, and he fell in love. Not easy to do after the horrors of war, and then you've got a nurse looking after you. And they married. They moved to Paris. Paris was a cheap place to live. After it was decimated after the First World War, and the American dollar went quite far. Quite a lot of artists, painters gathered there, and whether it was obviously, the First World War was big culturally, and people were coming to terms with it, and artists were trying to find ways to express themselves. Now, what was this style that he was kind of pursuing? Well, lots of things came together. So it wasn't just him. He was a product of his time. But before the First World War, the Edwardian England, things were kind of stuffy, a bit pretentious. Manners and society, ranks of society, and the Americans, had the War of Independence, were separating themselves from that kind of thing. We're a republic, more everybody was equal. Obviously there's still slavery and whatnot kind of going on, but they had a different outlook a more kind of raw, Wild West, simplistic, but in their eyes, more truthful. And those were the two elements that Hemingway wanted to bring to writing. One was a pared down style, so get rid of flowery adjectives, and secondly, to try and write truthfully, so to draw on real life. So don't write about war experiences when you hadn't been to war. You just sound like an idiot compared to people who had. So that was his two things. One, that pared down style. Other things in there, like the use of repetition, and he did use artistic tricks as well. But so pared down style, and secondly, to be truthful. So he would put himself in situations. So he put himself in a war situation. He was in America. He could have kept out of it, but he volunteered. And once the war was over, he was looking for life and death situations. So he went to go and watch bullfighting and things like that. So those were the elements that he wanted to bring to it and to this book. Now, this book is quite a cultural phenomenon. It happened, it's a bit of a product of its time, but when you read it, it's not that dated. You can still feel, it's not like reading, Pride and Prejudice, where it's a wonderful book, but it's of a distant time and place. This is modern. It's still, modern sensibilities, modern ways of looking at things. Apart from, where he's kind of being rude about his Jewish friend and things like that. So, it's not always politically correct through it, and we'll come on to that. So anyway, so the when I say it's his first main book, this is the type of guy that he is. He's in Paris. He's, pretty poor. He's trying to be a writer, and he has got this is my opinion, he seems to have a kind of a dichotomy going on, that he thinks he is going to be and trying to be a great writer, and he's prepared to criticise great writers that have gone before. But yet at the same time, he hadn't been published, and he wasn't there yet. Now, his novella was called Torrents of Spring, and it was a Mickey take on a very established and famous writer. I think it's Sherwood Anderson, is it? And everybody knew that this was a Mickey take of his style, and I don't know whether it was it was the style of writing that Hemingway didn't like. So he wrote this, it was published, and everybody knew in literary circles that it was a Mickey take. And I'm not saying that this novel, Torrents of Spring, destroyed Sherwood Anderson, but he didn't really do much. He wasn't really, he's not thought of now, and Hemingway is. So he's prepared to be quite vicious. He's, in writing true to life, and this book being one of them, it's about a group of friends, and it's based on the people that he was knocking around Paris with at the time. And he's prepared to use their basic personalities and stories about them and twist them into this book. And, he's prepared to risk those friendships to get this book done. He also goes through, I think is it 4 wives over his life. So he's prepared. The number one thing in his life is to be a great writer. And in reading the book, we get the benefit of that, because it is a great book. Right, so we'll be more specific about the book after that. Now, it's about a group of his friends. Him and his, the main character is partially based on him. About a group of friends in Paris after the First World War. Now, the if I've looked online at other people's opinion of the book, and it's, some of it is good, but some of it completely misses what the there's two main elements in the book, and it's really disappointing when they miss one of the main elements, if not the main element. So the first strand of the book is this idea of a lost generation. People will read the book and say, well, it's just about a lot of people getting drunk, living, a bit of a, they're searching for something and not really finding it. They get drunk, they fall, they have, they fight a bit, they fall out with each other, they go off to watch bullfighting, they go off to do fishing, but it misses that they, the character is a journalist, and he was a journalist in real life, and he works incredibly hard at his day job, and this is outside of that. So, they're saying, he's just going off and getting drunk. But, it's not in the book, but it is about somebody who works very, very hard, and then his escapism with his friends. So this lost generation, where it came from was he had a poet friend who was famous and he wasn't, Gertrude Stein, and she was a bit of a bossy character. I think she was a lesbian, so what? And she was older, and she was having her car fixed, and the man in the garage was saying, he apologised that it wasn't fixed. It was a young man, who was working on the car, and he wasn't very good because he was part of this Une Generation Perdue, I think he says in French, a lost generation. After the war, these people are just all lost, and Hemingway took umbrage at that. Hang on a second. He was really hardworking. He was very determined to be a great writer, and he was spending a lot of his time, editing Gertrude Stein's long-winded poetry and writing, because she couldn't be bothered to do it herself. She didn't like it, so he was criticising, saying, "Well, why are you criticising? What are you criticising me for? What are you criticising my generation for? I'm prepared to work hard. You're not." But in some sense, this lost generation, the reason, again, it's opinion, the lost generation, I think, comes from this idea of, before the war, people were up for Queen and country, were religious. There were pillars of society that people just took for granted and cling to. And, you can never fully gauge cause and effect, whether it was heading that way anyway, what causes what. But, a lot of those pillars have fallen down. Not a lot of people are religious anymore in the West. People don't follow class structures. So that's, in that sense, the people were kind of lost. They'd been through near-death experience. Lots of people that they knew and loved were dead and had died in horrible circumstances, and a lot of people thought absolutely pointlessly. So they were lost because they didn't have those things to cling to. And in this book, people are kind of putting themselves into, a bit of a hedonistic lifestyle, and to hell with the consequences, which a lot of post-war societies go a bit like that. People want to live and have experiences, throw themselves into romance, get married quick, because you might die, or you've seen death and that kind of thing. So it is a bit of the book is a little bit of, it looks hedonistic, but some of these people did have, including the main character, have, they were working hard as well at the same time. So yes, that's the kind of the lost generation thing. Now, the other main strand of the book is, I think, absolutely phenomenal. It's absolutely amazing. Hemingway in the First World War got injured and he'd got his knee. He nearly lost his leg. He was badly shook up. So he was a young man, felt himself indestructible, and then overnight he realises he isn't, and death almost visited upon him, and he now has those special scars. He feels now different to other people that haven't been through what he's been through. Now, when he was in hospital, as well as meeting his wife, there was a ward near his ward, which were young men in the First World War who got injured, where no man, well, you don't want to get injured anywhere, but injured where no man would want to get injured. And they had a range of different injuries. And obviously he's young, he's not really been around women much, he's not had any children, and he sees all these poor fellows that are now injured in that area. And this really stuck with him, and he, and it gave him this idea for to write about it. He obviously thought it was important. Now, this is in this book, and this is the thing that I find really frustrating when people don't, when people review this book and completely miss what's going on. So he's the main character in the book has this injury, and the way that Hemingway writes is it's like a bit of it's back to his true to life thing. So what happens in when there's something that has horrible happened, is people don't talk about it, they talk around it, they treat people in a particular way. So unlike an old style, it would be talk about it and it's discussed and what have you. This is there in the background. So the main character in the book, and it's not outright openly said, but it's there all the way through the book. It's the core of the book, is that this First World War veteran, he's young, he's clever, he's handsome, he's strong, he would be attractive to ladies, he's got a good job, but this guy is impotent and is going to be impotent for the rest of his life. And so that's the main character of the book. And the genius of the writing is how Hemingway writes about that without writing about it directly. It's there, chipping away at all his situations when he's talking with his male friends, but particularly with the love interest in the book. And now that's what the book is about. It's about that lost generation being hedonistic. The female character has had her own First World War experience of the love of her life dying, and she's having to cope with that. And her potential other love, this guy who's impotent, Jake, the main character, is impotent. So one lover's died, this other person that she could love is impotent, but she, after her First World War experience, she's probably the most hedonistic character in the book. She gets drunk, she sleeps around, she's drunk, she sleeps around. She's nice, she's a lady or what have you, and it's about their relationship. They come together, they get nearer and nearer and nearer, but she can't be with him because she wants to be sexually satisfied. It's basically as simple as that. and can't, you know, in some ways, it's a kind of a, she's, they're all guilty for surviving the war, and their good friends hadn't. So it's like, this is a curse. My lover's died. I'm in love again, but the curse is that you're impotent and I can't be with you, type of thing. So and all that is through the book. So you get these wonderful descriptions of, goes fishing, they go to the bullfights, but that's the foreground, and in the background is all of that happening. It is fantastically written. Now the the issue that you will have if you look at a lot of takes on Hemingway, it's because he was part of American culture. It's a book that is put in schools. It's been criticised up to the wazoo. People will look for it, and they'll, looking for connections, symbolism of this, that, and the other, and I find all that quite frustrating. The things that I find most frustrating is when you have these modern, quasi academics, so that come along and will suddenly say that half the characters are in it are either were secretly gay, or put the modern twist on. One of the protagonists, one of his friends in it is Jewish, and Hemingway criticises him, and says some Jewish tropes and various things about him, and so that dates it a little bit. But I think it's too far to say that he was anti-Semitic. You can have your opinion on it once you've read it, but it's more, other friends in the book are criticised as well. So it's more, if you've got a group of 5 friends that are close together, when one of them's away, the other 2 will start having a go at them and saying, "Oh, they're terrible at this and they're terrible at that, and they've done this and they've done that." So it's to me, it's a bit more like that. But it's you can't speak that way now. So the you might pick up on that. You might not like that bit in the book yourself. He isn't always a nice person. He can be the main character. He can be bitchy along the way. So it's probably a book that if you read it, hopefully you will absolutely love it. But if you go online and look, then it can be, because particularly from America, people forced to read it via school. It could be that you will. I think what a negative that you will come across from it is probably, it's a bit like a great song that some people have listened to so much that now they can't listen to it so more. So if you keep away from the actual criticism of people who are kind of like forced to read it and forced to criticise it, pull it apart, and all the rest of it, it's probably a bit like Shakespeare in this country. If you just kind of read some of it, you might actually enjoy it. But it's, there's a cultural weight there, isn't there, that you feel like that you've read it 10 times when you've never actually read it. But it is a very great modern classic. Okay, I'll just check I haven't missed anything else. So the the actual in terms of the book, what I really like about Hemingway's writing is how he kind of builds tension. He kind of has something hovering there, and it's kind of it's there, drip 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 dripping away. And then, just like real life, if you're with somebody, then if you're with a friend, you'll be talking a while, you might have a drink, and then they'll just let a sentence go, won't they, that they've kind of been carrying, that's really important. You know, people don't talk for ages and ages about something, and Hemingway is absolutely fantastic about that. So you'll have two characters, and then and then boom. And you know, it's probably got one of the best. It finishes nice. It's probably got one of the best finishing lines of any novel, and it's written in a modern way. So I've prattled on, perhaps more about Hemingway and the context of it than the book, but then that leaves you free to read the book. I almost forgot. So this is another side. I only discovered this relatively recently, but this is another side of Hemingway's character, about his kind of, like, he does have a bit of a, I don't know about a mean streak. That's two last things. So again, if you go online and look at the criticism, it will say, oh, Hemingway was all about investigating masculinity, outdoor sports, strong men, so outdoor sports, boxing, bullfighting, rah, rah, you know, masculinity. And of course, academics hate masculinity, don't they? So if you go online, you'll get all that kind of drip, 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 you know, toxic masculinity. So yeah, so just read the book, and yeah, avoid that type of stuff. But here's the last thing. So I said to you that the book's title was Fiesta. They asked for the title Fiesta because they didn't understand the title The Sun Also Rises. What are you on about? The Sun Also Rises. Fiesta, or people like that, you know, it's exotic and it's about bullfighting, and we'll go for the title Fiesta. But he wanted to keep the title The Sun Also Rises, and that's Hemingway's joke. The sun also rises. What also rises? Not this poor impotent guy. So that's what the book is about. Poor impotent guy who survived the First World War. A woman, she survived. Her lover's died in the war. She's now a bit of a lush and a bit hedonistic, and it's about their push-pull magnetism that can never be resolved. There you go. The sun also rises.